So as a bit of a recap, we can do our technology this morning. It seems like it's cooperating. We're really talking about freedom from fear. You know, this whole section has been based on fear. And so we're going to dig into that even more today. So as a quick recap, are we trapped by the myth of scarcity or abundance? We talked about scarcity and abundance, right? I kind of changed the word on my notes to the belief of scarcity or abundance. What do you believe? What starts in your heart? Do you believe there's enough? Do you believe in God's abundance? Or do you believe in scarcity, which leads to fear and hoarding and all kinds of things? And what do our priorities become if we believe in God's abundance? And so you did a graph for us.
Yeah, so we shared a lot of, I guess, metrics last week.
Yeah, a lot of data.
That was from Terry, and this was another one Terry found this week, and this is from Define Financial. I don't remember the year of this one, but this is based upon tax returns. And it's probably really hard to see.
It's really hard to see.
But I tried to capture all of our income levels, less than 50 to $2 million a year. I think I've covered. I think I covered everybody.
If you're outside of that, we can talk later.
We can talk later. But it's interesting how the giving the charitable giving as a percentage of your adjusted gross income for those under $50,000 is about 9%. When you get above 50,000, from 50,000 to 100, it drops to just under 5%. From 100 to 500, it's just over 2%. And it goes up when you go between 500 and $2 million to, under 3% still.
I think it goes up like 0.25%.
Yeah. But really interesting how the most charitable as a percentage of adjusted gross income are for people who earn under $50,000 a year.
So let that stick for a minute, right? So we think, we justify, well, when I have more, I'll give more, right? Or I'll wait until. It's always that word until. Well, I mean, the data kind of say, unless somebody in here is unique, but the trend is, well, as you make more, you give less. And so I think, not to convict anyone, but it should make us look at our own situation and decide, do I really believe in God's abundance? Or am I really living in this belief of scarcity, that there's not enough and I need to keep? Something to think about.
That sort of jives with that scripture that you said, that word had this financial meaning too.
Yes, it was the heart.
6:28, I forget where it was.
Yeah.
But that totally jives with that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I was online the other week and I thought you said something and I wasn't sure, and I'm not trying to be critical, but you weren't like real snappy with answers to my online little thing.
Sorry.
There's a lag.
I
did not expect you to, because you're like 5 feet away from that. I wanted to ask you, because I thought you said, but I'm not sure, like there's research that says that once you as a family earn over $75,000 a year, there is a discernible increase in happiness up to that. And then as a family, if you earn over $75,000 a year, there is no discernible difference between that and then millions of dollars. And I thought you quoted that the other week, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, 70,000 was the number, right? Or 75,000 was the number. And the statistic here is that households that make more than 75,000 are the least charitable, right? Kind of fleshed out by this graph.
So this research is about happiness that I'm quoting.
Okay, all right.
And it says this a very similar
Similar
thing.
thing,
It's
yeah.
interesting that that's the point.
Right. Well, that's kind of when we got on the more money, more problems.
Well, that's why I texted that question.
Mm-hmm.
So is this the price point of whatever, I forget, generosity?
Yeah.
Or
Right. And happiness, yeah. I mean, it definitely seems like there's a correlation.
like the nexus of
Yeah.
Right.
And I think this is all, I believe, and don't quote me on this, I can check if you want me to. I believe this is all US research.
Yeah.
Okay? So I think this is all kind of Western world research. Now, that could be a whole nother conversation, right? How does this apply to the rest of the world? Is the rest of the world affected by this, right? Maybe Germans that are millionaires give more and donate and are happier and whatever.
Well, like when you went to Africa, you commented how happy those people were,
Right.
and they were using water from puddles to use for their cooking and stuff. But you commented time and time again how happy they were.
Right, yeah, and it wasn't just happiness, it was joy, right? I mean, they're joyful people and they literally drink from puddles. And we think, well, I'll be happy when, right? I have more money, I have this paid off, I've got a nicer car, I've got these things. And I think there's a direct correlation, right? That we put money in the way of our joy, of our worship of God. And it's kind of borne out in the data.
And they probably help people more.
Oh,
'Cause
yeah,
you were
more
saying
sharing,
that there were
more-
groups of people bringing in other people just so they could see doctors.
Right, yeah, more community, right? I mean, there's definitely, it seems like as income goes up, then you get more isolationist and you get more self-centered and less self-aware, apparently, we're gonna talk about that. All this, and I think that's why the most discussed topic is money in the Bible, right? The love of money, the love of money. Money is not bad, but it's like fire. It can be very dangerous. If you don't pay attention to it, control it, it can consume you. So yeah, I think thank you for that. There's definitely correlations.
So then we all should just look at how much money we make.
Mhm.
And then if we make $150,000 a year, we should only work 50% of the time.
Exactly. Cut it all down, make 75, get right 74 now.
If that, in fact, is the price point of happiness,
Right,
would that not be the natural implication of such a conclusion?
exactly. That's right. That's what we should do.
Sounds
We're
like
gonna talk
your,
about that the rest of the time, how we do that.
sounds like your platform for socialism.
I didn't say share it. I said only make, because what would you do with all the rest of your time?
Right, exactly, yeah.
Drive your wife crazy.
Charitable time, yeah, exactly.
Well, that's why we have therapists.
That's right. So you would, yeah, okay.
But I mean, isn't that interesting, just even as a thought experiment? Obviously, I'm not going to be convicting and you wouldn't do that.
No, it is, absolutely. And so you could also argue then that this changes our hearts, because the conversation we've been having is about the heart change. This is about what comes out of our heart, whereas our heart, does our heart believe in God's abundance, or does our heart believe in scarcity? And so apparently as we make more, receive more income, have more revenue in our lives, that our heart changes, right? Less charitable. So this could lead to, if we're less charitable with our dollars, are we less charitable with our time? Are we less charitable with our attitudes, with our availability? Right? It's not just money charity, it's all the things that God says, serve others, right? Put others first, consider others better. Our pride could go up because we have more money. Like all these things, this is a direct correlation. But I don't know, is it the chicken or the egg, right? Is it the heart that changes, or is it the money that changes the heart?
Well, Jesus talks a lot about we are stewards of God's gifts. And I had a job where I was in charge of accounts payable. It was no problem for me to write out very large checks and send them off to different businesses, because I was just kind of a steward of the account.
Right.
But when you have your personal account, then it becomes more painful.
Right.
And so it just occurred to me, it's really easier if we look at our own resources as they're passing through us. God gives us resources and we are stewards. They're not ours, but we will be held accountable for how we use his resources.
Right. See, that's a great example, right? That's a great circumstance where we can see what are we doing in our lives, right? And I've run into accounts payable people that treat it like their own, and they get mad that they have to write a check to a company, right? Why are we paying them this? They don't do good. Like, but we should be stewards of this stuff.
Well, also what y'all are talking about here now, Jesus told that story about the man that has such a windfall of crops and stuff. So his first thought is, well, wow, I got to build bigger barns so I can store my bigger crops so that I can eat, drink, and be merry, i.e., so that I can just chill and not worry about going out and doing more for other people. I mean, really, that's what he was saying. I mean, and that's what you were asking, made a comment that possibly when we get to does that mean that we're gonna use that time to go out and be more charitable even with their time? When the story Jesus told, no, the man wasn't going to be. He was just going to use it for himself, and I can relate.
Yeah,
Not
exactly.
that I make a lot of money or anything like that, but, you know, oh, but now I can just kind of chill and just lay back in my recliner and you know, watch TV or sports or whatever.
Well, and money gives us this illusion, like we talked a couple chapters ago, right? So I don't have to give my time. How much of a check do you need? Here you go, right? I have that capacity, I have that capability. So now I don't have to serve. I can just write a check and we think somehow those are interchangeable, right? So it can be all consuming. Kristen?
Yes.
Okay, that's our recap.
That is our recap.
Yeah.
That was fascinating.
Thank you, Ellen. That was good discussion.
So interesting how we go from this discussion of abundance and scarcity, you know, that fear of not having enough. That's just one of many fears that we have to deal with. And this chapter is about if Jesus was serious, then we will not be enslaved by our fears. What's the first fear that comes to your mind? Spiders, snakes? No, that's not Alan's. Any more daughters?
You conquered that.
I've conquered that one. That's right.
You dying,
That's right.
that's fine.
Yeah, dying.
There you go.
So
You
I,
dying.
Yeah.
Me
you're-
dying.
You dying. I was saying. Here alone.
up here alone. right.
Being alone, that's what's wrong.
Yeah. What is your enslaving fear? And we threw a bunch of examples up here, right? Being alone, being rejected, being noticed. Some people, that's a big one. Being wrong, being weak, being last.
The patient guy, we'll wedge that in there, being last. I put that on the slide.
Nice. The fear of death, the fear of loss, the fear of pain, the fear of want. What is your enslaving fear? We all have them. Yeah, I mean, there are fears in our lives. And that really does dictate things. And we really came out of that, you know, fear of not having enough, right? The scarcity, where we begin to hoard and we're not charitable. But what else is driving our lives?
One thing you didn't put on there is like during the pandemic, like with me and my health issues, I was really afraid to go out in public because I didn't want to get COVID.
Right.
And so he loves people and did not want to stay at home. I mean, it kind of separated us because I stayed at home and he did his own thing. But it's just kind of weird getting back into public now and not having that fear.
Right, fear of being sick. Right?
I didn't have that fear before.
Right. Right.
And so now, I mean, it's just a weird, it just messes with your brain.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What's interesting to think about is if you're willing to examine yourself and figure out what fear drives you, it's very interesting, right? You can drop the facade and I'm not afraid of anything, right? Whatever it is. But, just figure it out and really then look in the mirror and determine, man, what does this fear drive me to do? What does this fear drive my behaviors to do? Fear of losing Aaron drives us to do things that maybe aren't healthy, right? Or fear of potentially getting sick maybe drives us to separate ourselves and do things that aren't healthy. It leads to unhealthiness and it changes our heart in the wrong direction. So we don't have everything on this list, obviously, but maybe there's a fear that enslaves you. Now we're all concerned about things and, take steps to protect ourselves and our family. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about fears that change your behavior in unhealthy ways.
So I work with a lot of traumatized people, and I've learned that it's very common for people who have been traumatized, who have experienced in some way, shape, or form being trapped, right? I just watched a television show last night. The guy was actually talking about it. He got drunk and then opened up in this monologue almost. And he was talking about being held down by somebody.
Mhm.
You know, and the fear of being trapped leads to a lot of very illogical reactions in people that often seem like they have nothing to do with anything, right?
Right.
But like feeling even trapped in a crowd, which is like agoraphobia or social, you know. And anyway, it's not on the list, but it's something that I experience a lot of people have that feeling.
Mhm. Yeah, some of us probably have some version of feeling trapped or something that happened in our lives. We may have not gone to therapy about it, but you know, I'll be trapped. You know, people that come back from conflicts, they come back from war, they have fears, right? And you know, I've been around a few people that have come back, you know, like they at work the next day, and it's real to them, right? This fear of something. Fear of being ambushed, fear of something happening they can't control, fear of being hurt, and it enslaves us. We don't control
Also, fear of being useless.
it. Fear of being
And I
useless.
think, you know, if you deal with chronic pain and, you know, are out of commission, or as you get older and lose your physical ability to do things,
Right.
you feel like I'm not contributing to life or my family or my community. What's the point?
Right.
You know?
It's a good one.
And some people might think you're lazy
Right.
because you have those things.
Right.
Oh, you know, she's not doing this because she doesn't feel good today.
Right, yeah,
You know,
Fear-
people don't understand, and they don't care to understand.
right. So fear of being useless, fear of perceived as being
Yes.
useless, right?
Fear of what people think.
Fear of what people
Yes.
think.
is what it is.
Mhm. Absolutely. I'm talking a lot.
No, you're doing such a great job.
It's the Mountain Dew.
Yeah, I'm glad I mentioned it. Yeah, if we saw our lives as being completely surrounded by Jesus, how would we live differently from our fears? And this is an interesting prayer. So this is a prayer from St. Patrick's. Are we close to St. Patrick's Day?
Close enough.
Yeah, so this worked out well. Christ with me. Hang on. A fear of not being able to read here. Christ with me. Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ within me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ at my right, Christ at my left. Now we're going to talk a little bit more, another part of this same prayer, but this is St. Patrick. This is one of his prayers. This is how he wanted to be perceived, and this is how he wanted to live. And if you don't know much about St. Patrick, he was the part of Ireland's key Christian story, but he wasn't Irish. He was British. He was taken as a slave and used as a slave in Ireland for many years. He escaped, went back to Britain, but after then he had a passion for bringing the Christian message back to the Irish people. But, you know, what fear did he have going back, you know, into that situation where he was a slave for so many years? But he overcame that fear to take back the Christian message. So what do we fear? What fear are we a slave to? That's really, you know, I think what we need to understand.
Absolutely.
Fears. It starts out as a little kid, right? Scared of a monster, scared of a toothbrush. We're scared. I mean, we make up these things, right? As a little kid, we either have our little kids or we remember what our fears were as a child, right? Sometimes they're irrational, but what do they become as we get older, right? The one here on the left, I don't even know what that is, but sometimes we're afraid of whatever that is, right?
You can't name it.
We can't name it, but it's just there, right? And picture on the right, you can see almost the terror in this little boy's eyes. A fear. Maybe to be less abstract here, right? The fear of being stomped on, stepped on, irrelevant, overwhelmed. Top right, death. Greatest fear. Or the bottom right, a fear of something somewhere grabbing us. Yeah, it could be anything, you know, at some point it's something under the bed, in the closet, But even as we get older, there's something we fear reaching out and grabbing us at the worst time. Right? Where do we see our fears? How do we deal with our fears?
Yeah, so the other part of this prayer that I really like to add are these, Christ in the heart of every man who thinks of me. Christ in the mouth of everyone who speaks of me. Christ in every eye that sees me. Christ in every ear that hears me. That just really impacted me, and fear prevents this, right? People see us as fearful Christians or, greedy Christians or Christians that are stingy. Then they can't see this. We're preventing them from seeing Christ. And we made this point a couple weeks ago. There's things that we can put in the way of our relationship with God and other people, and also blocks God from seeing what's in us for other people.
Yeah, this is a part of the same St. Patrick prayer as the Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ within me. Right? How are people going to see us? And it's a fear. It definitely is.
So we get rid of fear, we go to the next chapter.
Oh, wait, did we get rid of fear?
I think we did.
Oh,
That's how we turn the page. So if Jesus was serious, then we can give ourselves away for the sake of others without fear. Right? So all this conversation about fear, all this self-reflection about fear, we can find a way to give ourselves away for the sake of others with no fear.
yeah, the most generous people are typically those with the least amount of fear. Have you noticed that? Does that make sense? Fear of,
So going back to the thing we talked about, so the more money you have, the more you're afraid you're gonna lose it.
you're afraid to lose it.
I mean, is that
That's the
Absolutely.
conclusion, yeah.
corresponding?
Yeah.
Seems like it.
Because if those with the least are the most generous, yeah, it's kind of the flip side, right? The more I have, the more I worry about losing it. And so I become less generous, even in my supposed comfort, right? If you don't have anything to lose, what's the problem with being generous, it seems, which is a really counterintuitive almost. But it's the way it seems to be working.
I think when we're fearful, we walk around tight-fisted almost. It's our body language, everything about us, from our face, everything is with, we're just tight.
Yep.
But whenever you don't have that fear, you're more open-handed. Not even just figuratively speaking, but really, literally, you're more open-handed. You're more apt to hug somebody. You're more apt to have an open hand. You're more apt to give of yourself or anything if you're not always guessing, well, why? Why are you talking to me? What do you want from me? That's what fear does to us. It causes us to second guess everything, and even second guess the things that we do in being generous. Well, really, should I really do that? Well, what's going to happen next week if I don't get this paycheck? So many things fear does, and really, again, it's whatever Jesus says, what we're putting in our hearts, in our minds, not this muscle here in our chest. But, that's what's going to come out of our life. And if we're just constantly filling ourselves up with fear in the media, social media, people that are full of fear, and then we're like that rub off on us, that's what's going to come out of our life.
Exactly.
And the only way we can surround ourselves with Jesus is to be filled with Jesus.
Yeah, you just sparked a couple more things in our list that we should have had. Fear of being transparent, fear of being vulnerable, right? I'm open-handed, I'm welcoming. I have to be vulnerable, right? I could get hurt by greeting someone, by embracing someone, by welcoming them into my lives, by making friendships with them, by having a relationship with them.
Look how many times Jesus made himself vulnerable, when he's thinking along those lines, but he knew they were going to nail the religious leaders, but he still made himself vulnerable to the people that needed him because it was all about God.
Exactly. Yeah, like St. Patrick, it goes back to the people that enslaved him so he could share Christ. You didn't just say, I'm done with them, right? I'm only gonna-
I'll go somewhere
I'll
else.
go somewhere else, right? That's right.
Yeah, just like you said, the closed fist.
Right,
Yeah,
absolutely.
exactly.
Yeah, the closed fist. Fear is the great contractor. It also includes, the contraction of our soul. Our world shrinks, our generosity shrinks, our risk and adventure shrink. We begin to only think of ourselves, our needs, and our survival. And from that position, right, that's when we cannot show our love, because it's a defensive position. When we're not able to show love.
It's funny, man, you're preaching the sermon.
Again,
Because we're talking about
Sorry,
self-preservation
notes.
this morning in my sermon, and that's what that's talking about, how everything shrinks. We all begin to think of it. And I thought about, the reason I'm preaching it, because I thought about my life. How much of my life am I living to preserve myself, my lifestyle, what I got going on now, especially with the economy spiraling out of control, and inflation and all that. So we began to turn inward, and it's about self-preservation instead of really living, and that's enslaving.
Very much
We
so.
turn inward to self-preservation.
Exactly. That's why I love this paragraph. Our world shrinks, our generosity shrinks, our sense of risk and adventure shrinks. We're not taking any risks. Not taking any risks for God, not taking any risks because of our belief. Right? Like, no, it's too risky. I'm worried. I'm worried something will happen. Fear is shrinking my soul.
Yeah, defensive position. Interesting way to think about that.
So we had a couple of pictures here, right? So on the one hand, if you don't have fear, what happens when you're a little kid, right? You don't care about what color they are or whether they hurt you yesterday. I mean, none of that stuff matters, right? Like, hey, we're all friends today. You may be mad yesterday, but today we're going to lunch, right? I mean, that's the thing. The opposite of that is, right? Here I am, right? I'm protecting what I have. I'm protecting myself. I don't want to get hurt again. I don't want to feel trapped again. I want to be left alone. I don't need anything but me.
That's right. And which of these is it easier to show love, to give? I mean, when you think of these positions, and we've all been there in both of these.
I hate talk so much.
That's all good.
Tell me about kids, I just telling Sherry, I was in southern Louisiana when the Cuban Missile Crisis was happening. And I can remember going in our bathroom, and instead of being towels and washcloths in the cabinet, there were canned goods and water and supplies in case they fired the missiles, at the United States. But as a kid, we weren't worried. We went out and played, climbed trees, and rode our bikes, and all of that kind of stuff, And again, I think about one thing is my mom and dad. It was what the vibes we were getting from them, actually. And I just wonder, with some of the counselors in here, when you work with kids, how many of their issues are coming from the vibes that they're getting from their parents and the fear? What are we giving our children? Are we giving them a faith in God, a faith in Christ, that He is always with us, that He is within us, He's above us, that prayer from St. Patrick? Or are we giving them fear?
Right. You've seen a lot of examples, like in this Russian-Ukrainian thing, that people in other countries. The one the picture I saw just a couple of days ago was that, I don't know what country it was, but there was a picture of a bus station and all these baby strollers lined up, right? Because they realized moms from Ukraine are going to be getting off of this train, and they might need strollers. So they left all their strollers there, right? So that position of fear would say, oh man, that's the next country over. We better be careful. We better start hoarding our stuff. They said, no, these people need something. We can be generous, right? It's lack of fear that says, hey, we can be generous. You see examples of that like all week of people in other countries being generous because they realize, wow, they need it more than me. But fear drives us to be the opposite.
A really interesting point is, what do we teach our kids, right? Are they just picking up our fears, our hoarding of our money, our incapability of giving away? Or is there some way we can teach our kids something different about letting go of our fears and giving? And that's difficult because the kids pick up a lot about how we're feeling. And whether we mean to be teaching that to them or not is the question.
Well, I've seen on Facebook a lot, there's things being passed around that when I filled up my gas tank, so much money, how I would drive and, complain until I saw, until I think about the Ukraine where, well, at least I'm not having to run from bombs, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. And I just want to say, that sounds good. But that relieves us of a lot of responsibility because it's not necessarily about me, but there's a lot of people with our economy the way it is right now that are really struggling. And they are really struggling to put food on the table or to have heat in the house and that sort of thing. But when I see that, it's like, oh, I need to not worry about stuff because, hey, I've got a meal. I put the gas in the car. I don't have bombs falling on me, blah, blah, blah. But there are a lot of people around us that are hurting, and we do need to be concerned about people and others, even in our own neighborhood.
Exactly. I just want to make one more point about this photo, right? See kids doing this all the time, right? Kids on the playground, kids at school, kids on the weekends, you see kids like always. How often do you see adults doing this? Right? Unless they're young. So what's preventing us from doing that? What's preventing us from embracing people, not just physically, right? But with whatever they need. Some fear. 6 foot.
Say you try to do that to somebody dead, they're gonna pop you in the nose.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, not gonna work so well.
I think it's because kids are free.
Yeah,
You
that's
know
right.
what I mean?
Yeah.
I see kids at Washington High School, they're just, they love each other and they show it, you know what I mean?
That's right. That's right.
They're free
They're
to
free.
be a kid.
Free to be a kid, right? And
Yeah.
we've kind of grown out of that. My fear of being vulnerable, my fear of being transparent.
I think some of it also is while you may want to either physically embrace somebody or mentally let them know you're there for them, they don't let you.
Right.
Because they're afraid. They don't know what you're about necessarily. They're trying to get in their head or you want something from them or whatever.
Right.
We are afraid to let somebody in.
Right. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
you've got to have that relationship, personal relationship, or it's not going to go anywhere.
Can you go back one slide, more farther back?
Sure.
Where's that thing say about the risk?
Risk and adventure, shrink.
Yeah, I mean, like. Go off. Several
We don't have
places
6 minutes left. So. Right.
right now. But I mean, if how risk averse a person is, or how willing they are to accept risk, determines a lot of how they live their life. Right? We saw that during COVID. Some people are extremely risk averse, and some people are willing to take huge risks that are irrational, right? You could go down on either side, right?
Exactly.
But we all have to take risks. Like whenever we get in a car, we take a lot of risks. I mean, Lord have mercy. Just got a wreck right out there a couple months ago. With Pleasant, right? And I mean, every time we do anything, every time we eat a spoonful of food at a restaurant, you're taking a risk.
Right. Exactly.
Especially if it has mayonnaise or what is it, eggs? What's the number one thing that
Yeah,
kills people?
it's eggs or mayonnaise.
Yeah, it's one, yes, yeah, it's in like eggs. And so it's like we all take risks unwittingly throughout our lives. It's a risk of being a church building. I mean, we have an armed security guard in the back.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
and we did that because 3 churches got shut up like within a couple months. So we all take risks.
Right. Right.
It's just like how averse are we to take the risk, or how much are we willing to own those things? And then I don't know, that second line right there really just grips me. Like fear contracts the soul.
Oh,
You know?
yeah. And I want to tie those 2 points together, right? Because you've been around somebody who's fearful, it's kind of contagious. Like, oh, you don't want to, but if you're around somebody who's confident, right? How many times have you been with someone like, I wouldn't have done this if you weren't here? Your confidence got me to do this. Your lack of fear inspired me to do whatever we were doing, right? Jump out of the plane or whatever. So it can be contagious. Either way, it depends on us. What are we willing to see?
Well, you're not living in reality.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, oh, you know, you believe in God? Oh, but yeah, hey, man, look around you.
Right.
You know, you're not facing reality.
Exactly, yeah. And it's about how we respond, right? God sends the rain on the just and the unjust alike, and the sun on both. And it's how we respond that makes the difference. You're never, it's several slides ago, right? Do we want to change our circumstances or do we want to change our hearts? People that have fear want to change their circumstances. People that have fear but trust God want to change their hearts. That's the dramatic difference.
Yeah.
I just wonder that for St. Patrick, then we ought to all cut that thing out, put it on the mirror somewhere and say, and let that be part of our prayer every day. Just remind us that thank God, he's all around me and not just around, he's in me.
Right.
There's a really good song. I think Chris Collins wrote it, called Whom Shall I Fear? And the words to that song are really powerful. Because it says, I know who goes before me, I know who goes behind. And it talks about God surrounding us, basically.
You want to read one of the verses that we had on our last slide? We got a couple minutes left.
Yeah. Yeah, this is our last slide in this section.
Yeah, think about the most generous, not only wealth, but the most generous Christian person you know. What's the quality in them that makes them able to give time, money, right, service without fear? Is that something we want to emulate? What areas of your life are focused on fear? That's our challenge for this week. We'll limit it to one. Is examine this, right? What fear prevents you from doing, like, there's probably something like, well, I wish I could be more generous. I wish I could do this. I wish I could do that. Figure out what it is that's preventing you. Luke 12, 32 to 34 reads, do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to the poor. Provide purses for yourselves that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven that will never fail, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. We focus on those last few verses, right? But the first one, 32, do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. That's no small gift. But yet we want to argue over the tiniest things.
Yeah, and from Isaiah 43, I'll just read a couple portions of this. Fear not, for I have redeemed you. How about that for a starting point to get rid of fear? I have summoned you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. When you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. Can we take that as a starting point? Just try to get over our fears and not contract and begin to love. Brian really wants to push that button.